So hello everyone, welcome to Sunya IAS. Now this is part of your ongoing series on terminologies for high yielding topics specifically oriented towards Prelims 2023. Now this is your session number 4, okay, and in the previous lectures we have gone through the important terms from the nationalist struggle. We have also covered the terms from administration of the Mughals and the Marathas, and those were pretty many. So it took almost 2 lectures to do so. Fine. So we have done those things already, and now it's terminology part 4 in this session. Now before moving forward, let me also tell you a bit about, if you are very serious about your Prelims 2023, make sure to check out the Prelims oriented crash course which are there on Sunya IAS platform. The links are down below, so make them check them out. And also Sunya IAS is providing you handouts or handbooks which will be oriented directly towards prelims examination, so you actually don't even have to make notes and all. You can just watch the video and underline it from the handouts and then read in that way. That will really shorten the period of classes and will helpful for you. So make sure to check them out. Let's move forward. Now in this lecture we are at terminology 4, British administrative terms. That's what we are going to check out. And what were the terminologies and important terms, policy terms which were evolved or developed by the Britishers that we have to look in. Now, so there is a very famous word, policy of masterly inactivity. If you are a master, are you going to be inactive or you are going to be active? So that's the thing that you need to know, that somewhere around 1864, the then Viceroy of India, John Lawrence, came up with policy of masterly inactivity. So he was actually the second Viceroy who actually succeeded Lord Canning, and he was someone who knew what happened in the first Anglo-Afghan war. Now the first Anglo-Afghan war went on between 1849 and 1852, 1839 and 1842, okay, 1839 and 1842, and the outcome was such that the Britishers lost 20,000 men and 1.5 crore rupees, and these men were actually native Indians. What was there to show as the outcome? Nothing. They have to actually run for their life, and only one man alive was able to reach Jalalabad, the westernmost point of British control. Fine. So under these circumstances, everyone knew what is going to happen if you are there in Afghanistan. So that's point number 1. So even though it sounded like very beneficial, it sounded like, okay, look, Afghanistan is not that difficult, the government is not that established, and isn't the same case with Afghanistan even now? It seems like always very easy to go and access territories in Afghanistan, but once you go there, the things get pretty brutal. So it happened the same thing that time also, and you will see that therefore although the Tsarist Russian threat was real, reality was that it was really could have happened, that the Russians could have expanded into Afghanistan, and through that they could have tried to get access through what we know as Karachi and Sindh and Gwadar and those areas through Arabian Sea. But this is also true that going to Afghanistan was not at all supported by the natives also, and even the senior British officials. Keeping this in mind, you will see that John Lawrence will come up with the idea of masterly inactivity. He will not attack the Afghan territory, but he will make sure that no activity happens over there. As long as there is no activity happening from the Russian side, the British Indian side will also not do any activity, and this was the fundamental idea of masterly inactivity, okay, which was propounded by John Lawrence, and it was in use unless and until Lord Lytton came to power in 1876, okay, who initially applied the idea of proud reserve, but then subsequently you will see that went on to attack Afghanistan in the second Anglo-Afghan war between 1878 and 1880. We'll discuss about that in this lecture itself, but that you should know. Okay. So that's what policy of masterly inactivity. The inactivity, that means, was going to happen under very specific conditions. Okay. Doctrine of Laps. It's very interesting, very important. A lot of students get confused for it. Doctrine of Laps, what it is, what it isn't. So first of all, very important is a common conception among people, among aspirants, is Doctrine of Laps says that if you are a ruler in India and if you don't have a direct descendant from your bloodline, then the Britishers will not let your successor come to power and your territory will be taken over. It's not that simple. Basically, Doctrine of Laps comes from subsidiary alliance itself. So subsidiary alliance talks about, subsidiary alliance is something which talks about something very important, that is the idea that you will, or the Indian territory, Indian princely state will become a subsidiary of British Empire. Okay. Under these circumstances, it was also decided that there will be a relation of subsidiary and paramountcy. So the Britishers became the paramount power and Indians became the subsidiary. Okay. Those states who signed subsidiary alliance, they were then someone on whom Doctrine of Laps could be applied. समझें इसको. This is very interesting, very important. And before this, let me explain you the subsidiary alliance itself. It will make more sense then. So after 1765, the Britishers, when they came and started gaining power, somewhere around 1790s, they understood that it will be essential, helpful for them if they have some natives on their side. If the local rulers only are going to align with them, it will be really helpful for them. And so they came up with this concept of subsidiary alliance, that is the native princely state became subsidiary, native princely state became subsidiary, and the British Indian government or became the paramount power. Initially, the British Indian government was controlled by East India Company, but later this power went into the hands of British government directly, or British Crown, I should like, because British government was working on behalf of British Crown only. That happened in 1858. Fine. So this subsidiary alliance, what it talks about? Subsidiary alliance says that if you are a local ruler and if you are going to do this alignment with the Britishers, you will be allowed to maintain your autonomy. You can take all the decisions on native level. You can even collect the taxes, and all those things will be under your control only. The only thing Britishers will be interested in is that first of all you have to appoint or you have to accept a British regent, a British official who will stay in your court and will help to maintain the relationship between the British officials or British office in Calcutta and your princely state. Later on, this British officials, the British regents, started acting as actually the de facto ruler on the ground, and even the actual rulers, the native rulers, were sidelined. Then after this one point, the second point was that you also had to maintain a company of British Indian Army or British East India Company's army initially, and later on British Indian Army. And this, the Britishers said that this army was stationed in your territory for your own protection. And the best part about this was that the payment for maintaining this armed force in this army company, army battalion, was paid by the native ruler. So the army, the battalion, the company was answerable to the British East India Company and subsequently to the British Crown, but it was paid by the Indian native states exchequer. Fine. Now, the decision for war and peace was also in control, for the princely states was also in control of Britishers rule. Okay. So suppose if there are two neighboring princely states next to each other, and in both the empires, in both the princely states, the border forces are British East India Company's affiliated forces. Are they going to fight among each other? No. But they are stationed there and they are paid by both the native rulers. So ultimately the Indian princely states were paying for their own subjugation, because as long as these armed forces, these battalions were stationed there, the princely states ruler couldn't have much to do on their own. They couldn't, because they didn't had a standing army of their own. Fine. So that was also something very important for subsidiary alliance. Now over the period, the Britishers started having more and more control on this subsidiary alliance partner, and a lot of more say in their decision making also through the representative, the regent in these princely states. So that is the very idea of subsidiary alliance. Now coming to doctrine of lapse. So once you have a basic idea of subsidiary alliance, then in subsidiary alliance only the Britishers said that look, there are three types of states in India, three types of native states in India. First one, which has nothing to do with the Britishers. Okay, nothing to do with Britishers, they have no alignment, nothing. The second one, which are the states like Nepal, states like Bhutan. These were not part of subsidiary alliance. They had nothing to do with Britishers. They maintained friendly relationship with Britishers, but they were sovereign rulers. Even state of Jammu and Kashmir. Then there were these states who are controlled directly by the Britishers. The Britishers have taken over. Something like a Punjab, it happened. Or back in the day also a lot of territories, the territories which were directly taken over. For example, a lot of territory of Mysore was taken over directly by Britishers in the third Anglo-Mysore war, and finally in the fourth the whole state fell. And then the third one, who are the part of the subsidiary alliance. So the first one has nothing to do with it, the second one has nothing to do with it. Those states who were part of subsidiary alliance, now when Lord Dalhousie came to power as the Viceroy in 1848, he said that we are letting the successor of any native ruler to succeed him because he is a family member of that person. He is coming from that bloodline. And if that is not the case, then we can pick up anyone from the roadside and make him a king. And therefore, he said, the British argument was that unless and until you are coming from a specific bloodline, it will be in the hands of the British government to decide what has to be done. Look, over there also they didn't say that if you are not from the bloodline, you will not be made king. The point was, if you are not from the bloodline, then we will decide whether you will be made king or not. And that was just the one part of the subsidiary alliance. Subsidiary alliance had, that's a one part of the Doctrine of Laps. There is another clause in Doctrine of Laps which stated that even if you are part of subsidiary alliance and the British Governor General and subsequently the Viceroy thought that you are incapable of ruling, if he gets a report of maladministration, that is inefficient administration, corrupt administration, then also he can remove you from the power. He can either appoint someone else as the new ruler of the princely state, or even he can take over the whole territory and merge it with British India. That's his prerogative. Okay, so that thing also you have to keep in mind. So Doctrine of Laps coming from that point. One such state which was taken over by on the terms of maladministration was Awadh in 1856. Subsequently, what happened in 1857, Sepoy Mutiny in Lucknow, everyone knows what happened. That was an after effect of it. The few of the famous province states which were taken over by Doctrine of Laps through that bloodline thing was the state of Satara, state of Jhansi. Okay. This Doctrine of Laps created a lot of crisis among the Indian native rulers, because now everyone was threatened. After the demise of the Mughal crown prince in 1856, even Mughal Badshah, the last Mughal Badshah Bahadur Shah Zafar, was informed by the then Lord Canning, the Viceroy, that after your demise, we will not accept anyone else as Badshah-e-Hindustan. That also played a very important political role in the starting of revolt of 1857. So that's why doctrine of lapse is so important. Okay. Now let's move forward and let's take few other things. Ring fence, policy of ring fence. This is also, which actually is something which comes prior to subsidiary alliance. It was something which was given even far before. It was in 1780, 1790. Policy of ring fence is something which was introduced by the first Governor General, Warren Hastings himself. And he said what? He said, like, look, if this is India, over here is Calcutta, and if you'll see, you have something like this. Fine. Now, right now this is the map, but back in the time, Pakistan and Afghanistan, all territories were somewhat not defined. So you will see here that any incoming threat from the northwest, as you must be knowing that all the threats used to come from all the attackers through territorial routes came from the northwest, is going to come from this region. Okay. So a policy was devised that there are states like Awadh right here, and if this is Bengal, this is Calcutta, and this is Bengal. So one easy way to make sure that not only fighting doesn't take, Britishers don't have to fight, but also that the fighting don't take place on the border of Bengal. Because if the fighting take place on the border of Bengal, the stability of Calcutta will be gone. The trade of the Calcutta will be gone, because that's a direct outcome of the instability. So Britishers made sure that they will keep their forces in other provinces. They will keep the forces in other provinces and make sure that if any invading force is coming from anywhere, they will first have to fight the British East India Company's army in other territories, making sure that even in the worst of the worst case, if the fighting has to be done, it will be done somewhere else. This was done in 1790s. In 1790s, you will see that there was very real threat which Lord Wellesley saw, that Napoleon Bonaparte might come and attack India either from the northwest route, or will come from the Red Sea and come through Mysore. So what he did, he approached the Nawab of Awadh. He told the Nawab of Awadh that Napoleon Bonaparte will bring a force, and therefore he stationed East India Company's armies, battalions in Awadh Suba. Napoleon never came, but that army was stationed that if in case any invading force comes from northwest, the fighting will be taking place in Awadh. The Nawab of Awadh was told that it is for your security, but ultimately it was also securing Bengal, that is Britishers. Napoleon never came actually, but what came was a bill to Nawab of Awadh in 1801 for maintaining those battalions in Awadh for 3 years consequently. And when he didn't had that much amount to pay for the bill, he was forced to leave or cede some territory of his, the Sarkar of Gorakhpur. And I think we have seen the concept of Sarkar and Suba in previous lecture, so I don't have to explain it again. The Sarkar of Gorakhpur was given to Britishers in 1801. So that's where the ring fence theory came into being, and this is how it was practiced. Even the concept of buffer state, when the Britishers were interested to use Afghanistan as a buffer state between the Tsarist Russia and the British India, Afghanistan was also considered as a ring fence for the protection of main British Indian territories. Fine. Now let's move forward. Subsidiary lines we have done. Policy of proud reserve. Now policy of proud reserve is also very interesting, and it is something which was used extensively by Lord Lytton before he actually went for the war. So policy of proud reserve stated what? That army battalions will be maintained, but action will not be taken. Okay. The army battalion, more and more army battalions were maintained in Punjab and the border areas with Afghanistan, but they never entered the territory. This was more of a Cold War kind of a thing, where you are trying to pressurize the other side to make sure that the other side doesn't do anything. So the cold or the great game was already going on. The Russian territory, Russian entry, Russian threat was real, and Lord Lytton made sure that if I'll maintain enough of reserve forces on the borders, that Russians will be always threatened, they will never come and enter Afghanistan. And also the Britishers also don't have to enter Afghanistan, it will act as a buffer zone. So Proud Reserve's outcome is to maintain buffer zone neutral just by the sheer idea of threat. You might have known about Operation Parakram, which was taken up by India in the aftermath of attack on Indian Parliament in December 2001. And what Government of India did? We moved a lot of battalions, a lot of companies of Indian Army on the India-Pakistan border. You can compare such a scenario very similar to what Proud Reserve was. Okay. But then you will see, then in 1878, finally, when even the Proud Reserves, the huge number of army men on the borders were not able to threaten the Amir of Afghanistan, who went to allow a Russian envoy to come and enter the Kabul city, and he didn't allow the similar kind of British envoy. Lytton considered it a real threat to the British India and allowed these Proud Reserves to enter in Afghanistan, and so started the Second Anglo-Afghan War, which happened between 1878 and 1880. Okay, the outcome of it was the signing of the Treaty of Gandamak, which kind of handed over the foreign policy control rights of Afghanistan to the British India, which was running from Calcutta. But that's another session. Policy of Proud Reserve is this much only. Okay. So actually that will be all for this session. I hope this small and important keywords must have given you some basic idea. Let's catch up in the upcoming lectures and we will go through some more terminologies which are important and usable for your examination. Thank you and have a nice day.